and most of you have permission anyway. So we're going to go over a bunch of things, but I don't expect you to write everything. There'll be a couple things I'm like, all right, make sure to focus on this. But this is going to kind of give you an overview. So here's one example of an Egyptian pyramid. Now, the one that you're going to be doing for part 2 is going to be slightly different, but overall the same kind of idea. Please, for part 2, use your textbook and not this image right here. But we see, obviously, the top is going to be, the royal family. Then you have your nobles, your scribes, priests. Sometimes you'll see priests up higher. Sometimes you'll see, like, these kind of combined in some ways. And it goes all the way down to where you have soldiers, sailors, and on the very bottom you have farmers and slaves. Here we could see what Egyptian daily life was like, though. And so you're probably going to want to leave the other one if you... Oh, I bet I know why you can't hear me. Let me make sure it's the right microphone. Because I've got my headset plugged in because I was playing that game yesterday. Oh, yeah, no, it's the right microphone. So, I don't know. Maybe you turned your volume down, Con, because of all the chaos. All right, so what's cool about the Egyptians is we know so much about them. Yet we don't. There's so many mysteries. But we know what daily life was like. We see the animals they had, the tools they used, how they did their work. It's pretty cool. I like it. Now, here, what you need to know is that peasants did the farming and the building. You don't have to go and have all the details here, but you basically need to know when it was flooding season, guess what? They worked on building for the government. When it was planting season, they planted. When it was harvesting season, they harvested what they planted. So basically, your life revolved around the Nile River and what it did. And, the Egyptians, they didn't get time off. It's not like how we have summer break. It was like, oh, they can't go plant anything because the Nile River's flooded. This is when you get to go build pyramids, guys. Oh, boy. And they did. And it took thousands of people, thousands of hours to make some of the most amazing structures humankind has ever built. Now, we did have a group of artisans. Once again, this is something that it's more for you to get the idea. You do not have to really be writing these things down. But they had some of the finest artisans of the world. The Egyptians worked a ton with gold. They're going to go work with iron, and eventually they're going to go work with bronze, or assuming they're going to start working with bronze and eventually going to start working with iron. But they're going to do tons with gold, silver. We have found amazing jewelry and statues. I'm really sad because around this time of year is when we would start going to the Walters Art Gallery, and we would be able to see so many Egyptian artifacts, including some marble and gold statues. So I definitely recommend you can go there for free. It's right in Baltimore, so it's close. See if your parents will take you to the Walters so you can check out the mummies and see some of the cool, amazing things from Egypt. Now, here we see Egyptian nobility. What you need to know from here is you need to know that the Grand Vizier had more power than all people, with the exception of the Pharaoh. The Grand Vizier is going to basically act as the Pharaoh's right-hand man. Now, these noble positions, it's not because they were talented. It's not a meritocracy, meaning it's based on your ability. It was solely based on who your family is. Michael is a noble because his father was a noble, who was a noble because his grandfather was a noble, who was a noble because his great-great-grandfather was a noble. This idea that probably somewhere along the line he was related to the royal family or friends with the royal family, and they get their wealth, their power from their families. And here we can see how nobles would dress. We see the girls would have long white kind of gown, how their hair would be. We're going to talk about their hair in a minute. It's pretty cool. Well, you should probably leave it, Michael, so that you can get back to class. We have, the noble men. They would often wear this kind of thing around their neck, but they wouldn't wear too much. And you think about it, like the woman wearing loose clothing, the guy's not wearing a lot. It's because it's really hot. And, we'll see people in hot climates are going to wear, cooler kinds of things. Now, into some fashion. Some of the first mirrors, yep, guess what? Egypt. They would polish the metal so they could see their beauty. Um, the wigs are something that I really, really love about the Egyptians. And let me tell you, guys, we're probably going to see some of the girls start copying the Egyptian styles because they're going to realize how beautiful it is. So the Egyptians did not like body hair at all. They thought body hair was gross. It made you like an animal. So like men and girls would like shave off like all of their hair. Well, Alexander, you shouldn't be there anymore, and we shouldn't be worrying about that meat. We should be worrying about our history right now. So, like, even things like eyebrows and your head. So, Shania has beautiful hair, but if she was an Egyptian, she would say, I'm going to make it even more beautiful. And she would literally shave off all of her hair on her head. I know, crazy, right? Why would you want to do that? Well, because then they would put on these wigs. Because if you notice in the hieroglyphs, Egyptian women always have the same hair. And you're like, why does everyone have the same haircut? You know, were artists lazy or what? No, it's because they would go and slaves would have their hair cut off and braided into braids like this. I'm pointing with my hand, and like you can't see my hand, Lane. And like everyone would wear a wig, all the women. So men would typically be completely bald, and women would put a wig on their head. And it didn't matter how great your natural hair was, what your natural hair color was. No, every like noble woman for fashion, isn't that crazy, would go do this. And then, you know, you had to take care of this wig because it's not, you know, it's made of real hair. So what they would do is they would have this special perfume, and what they would go and have is they would have like this animal lard. Yeah, no joke. So animal fat, and they would put like nice smelling things in it. And so like, you know, for Adelina's beauty treatment to make sure her hair was going and looking good, they would go put this animal fat with all these nice smelling things like on top of it. And it was like hair conditioner, like how, I don't know how many of you guys use hair conditioner. I use an all-in-one shampoo and conditioner. But yeah, that's how they would do it because they didn't have all the things like we do. So yeah, they would put this animal fat on their wig on top of their head, and it would like seep down, and that was like their perfume and the way they kept their wigs in good condition. Yeah. So don't worry about, guys. You'll start seeing the girls, you know, shaving their heads, putting on wigs all that time. It happens every year. Danny, why was Ella trying to invade our history class? Unbelievable.
She was telling me that she had a weird dream.
Oh, that she shaved her head and was now wearing a wig of human hair and had to put animal fat on her head?
No, it was that she had a hole in her underwear. That was
Ew.
literally the dream. I was like, what?
Okay. Interesting. Now, the priests, we already know that they're going to be super important. You don't really have to write anything down here. But once again, we see the rich Egyptian men. They're going to have their heads bald. All right. Servants, no, not so much. They would have some hair. But the lower classes, because they can't afford to get wigs and can't afford to shave themselves all the time. Here we see some of the differences with the homes. If you're a peasant, your home would be very small. It would have like hay or reeds for a roof, you know, whereas if you were middle class or rich, you'd have a big home. You'd have lots of rooms. You'd have a courtyard. You'd have like some of your own personal farmland. Now, differences between boys and girls here. Men were considered head of the family. Their jobs were typically labor, you know, either making something or going and farming. Well, I guess making food. And their jobs were based on heredity, meaning if Kadir's dad was a farmer, Kadir would be a farmer. It doesn't matter if Kadir is not good at farming. It doesn't matter if Kadir is really good at making music. If Kadir's family were a bunch of farmers, the Connors forever would be farmers. Whereas, you know, and the same thing if, you know, Danny's dad was a goldsmith, he's going to be a goldsmith. If Michael's dad was, you know, a jewelry maker, Michael would become a jewelry maker. You know, that's just how it was. You know, if Eker's family were blacksmiths that make weapons, guess what? Eker is going to be a blacksmith that makes weapons. He doesn't have a choice in it because it's all heredity, meaning based off your family. We do have polygamy, meaning men did marry more than one wife, or they could, but that typically was only the richest people would do that sort of thing, like the pharaohs. Most people, they were only married to one person. Girls had a lot of legal rights compared to other parts of the world, which is nice to see. We saw that in Egypt, girls helped with farming and did some of the labor. So we see some equality amongst jobs. And the nice thing about Egypt is girls have the same legal rights. In some parts of the world, girls couldn't own property, or they couldn't get a divorce if their husband was a jerkbag or anything like that. Couldn't own land. But in Egypt, women could own land. Some women owned businesses. Women could get divorces. Women, had the same legal rights as guys, which is pretty fantastic. And that meant that not all women chose to get married in Egypt, which is rare for this time period. And women could go on with their own lives. So it was, for the ancient world, a pretty fair society, which is fantastic. Now, it wasn't perfectly fair, but it was much better. I mean, we're going to have even women become pharaoh, like Hatshepsut. Now, people are going to discriminate against her and try not to listen to her and say, we shouldn't be listening to a girl, but they did for a long time and had a great golden age of Egypt. Now, yeah, I think that's good for you. Like I said, we don't have to be writing all of this stuff down. This is just an overview so you can be aware of what life was like for people in Egypt. Here we see an example of Egyptian schools. And for the most part, you're going to have your scribes going and learning how to do your hieroglyphics. That's going to be big schooling. But the nice thing is all kids got some sort of an education. So that might be one thing to put down, something that makes Egypt unique. Every child got an education. Now, granted, Maddox, because his family are scribes, is going to get a better education than Alex, whose family are farmers. But still, they're going to get an education. Things that they're going to actually have in there, things like manners, how to be polite, how to do the right thing in situations. That would be one of the big things. For some of the jobs, it would be things like math. Most jobs, though, it would be more learning how to do what your family does. And if you're a priest or scribe, you'd have a lot more schooling. What's really cool, too, is that I talked about how Michael was a noble because his family were nobles. I think it was Michael. But he still had to have the education to do the job. So he would get tested, just like how we have tests, to make sure that he was able to handle it. And it was pretty cool that Egypt was also ahead of the curve, not only giving girls rights, but having education for people. And that's our notes for the day. I know it was quick. I know we covered a lot, but this is more to give us a general overview about Egyptian society as opposed to getting all the nitty-gritty details. We want to kind of know the themes and the ideas as opposed to all the complete specifics. So thank you very much. I'm stopping my recording now.